We have been in a collection of talks. I'm going to wrap it up today, and it is just to move this along. It was titled "Pushback," and it's all about how the world pushes an agenda on us, pushes a way of view onto us, and this is all about encouraging us to push back against that, to stay the course, and to remember Jesus and his sacrifice. You can be seated. I'm sorry, I didn't say that. I kind of like you all standing and So that's what it's been all about. But just to recap, I'm not going to go over every message, but just what we've learned so far. We've just been looking at Hebrews chapter 12, and this is looking at a collection of Christians 60 to 70 years post-resurrection. And they have grown up their entire lives as Jews, living according to the Mosaic law, doing the laws, doing the regulations, doing the rules. That's been their life. That's how they relate to God. That's how they are able to have a relationship with God, is by doing these laws. Jesus comes on the scene. You know the story. He says, I am God. I am the way. And I've come to bear your sins on a cross, a once and for all sacrifice that we all are invited into. And these people chose to believe that he was and is the Messiah. And that is where this leaves us in Hebrews chapter 12. They're being encouraged because they're being bullied, they're being persecuted by their family members and their friends, or so-called family members and so-called friends, and they're being told, no, he wasn't actually God. You have to go back to performance-based works, and that's how you relate to God. This is what it's all about. Don't fall into that trap. That's what they're being told. But Paul, we believe, is writing this in chapter 12, telling them, no, encouraging them. No, he was who he says he was, and he is who he says he is. And this was legit. And although you're going through it right now, it was real. And he does that in kind of three different ways, and we've looked at it in our 3 series. The first way, he just says, hey, remember Jesus. Remember Jesus. What he did for you, don't think about what you failed to do for yourself. Just think about what he did. That's their first reminder. And then the second week, he moves on in the passage, and he's like, listen, no. They're telling you it's fake, but it is real. He actually does love you, and they're telling you, no, there's no way. I know what you did. You got to do this. You got to do this. You got to get these things under control. Do you know what you did? They're trying to tell you it's fake, but guess what? It was real the whole time. He actually did fully and completely and perpetually forgive you of your sins, and he is giving you life. Although right now you're being bullied, and they're going, hey, where's your God? Why hasn't he showed up? Even though you're getting beat up in the streets, and it feels like you're losing your life. They're telling you it's fake, but no, it's real. He actually is giving you life. And then the last week, what we talked about is he kind of wraps up this picture by saying, look, I know life's uncertain. That's actually all life is. It's a mystery. It's unknown. You're going to be hit from every single direction possible. He doesn't tell them that life's not uncertain. He's telling them that, hey, I know you're going through it. And matter of fact, I know it's painful. And guess what? He tells them in Hebrews chapter 12, it's going to be painful. And we've looked at this and we've related it to our lives, and we've found that life is uncertain and it's going to be painful, but we learned last week that yet later it will produce a transformation of our character if we'll just yield to it. And Paul is telling them, hey, look, I know it's painful. I know it's uncertain. All that actually is a part of the plan. I know you're thinking you should be ditching right now on Jesus, but he was and is the Messiah. It is real. Life's uncertain. It's painful. That's actually a part of his plan. And he's saying, just trust God. Just yield to these things that are happening in your life. Let them happen. And what you're going to come to realize is that he was always in control the entire time. So this is how he reassures them. And this is what we've been doing. We've been looking at these things and we've been saying the world has been pushing us, telling us that, hey, you have control over your sin life. You can just stop whenever you want. And then we looked at the next week and we said that the world's telling us that the Father's love is fake. It's too good to be true. There's no way that you can just be forgiven and not have to do anything to earn that. And then the third week, we looked at it, and the world's telling us, look, you have to have an answer for every problem. You have to have a resolution. There must be an answer. And we found out that based on what God tells us in Hebrews, no, life is uncertain, and that's where He can be found the most. And it is painful. So we've taken that just as much as these Hebrews have. And this is their reassurance that they've made the right decision. That their experiences, that they're getting persecuted, that they're being bullied, doesn't change the truth about who Jesus is. Everything was and is legit. And that is what has happened here. And then this is how he wraps it up in a bow, and this is what we're going to do this week. And this is what I've titled my message today. By the way. It's as if Paul is saying, oh, and by the way. Now that you have this reassurance that Jesus was the guy, He is the guy, and you just forgotten for a second, and because you thought everything was supposed to be perfect and not painful, and everything was supposed to have an answer and not uncertainty, and that you thought that you could earn and deserve, and all these things. No. Just relax. Here's your reassurance. And then he concludes it like this. Oh, by the way. Now that you have this reassurance, this is what he says. Let's look at Hebrews 12, verses 14 through 17. This is how he wraps it up. In every relationship, be swift to choose peace over competition and run swiftly toward holiness. For those who are not holy will not see the Lord. Verse 15. Watch over each other to make sure that no one misses the revelation of God's grace, and make sure no one lives with a root of bitterness sprouting within them, which will only cause trouble and poison the hearts of many. Verse 16, be careful that no one among you lives in immorality, becoming careless about God's blessings, like Esau, who traded away his rights as the firstborn for a simple meal. Verse 17, and we know that later on, when he wanted to inherit his father's blessings, he was turned away, even though he begged for it with bitter tears, for it was too late then to repent. This is how he wraps it up. This is what he says. This week's push in our final pushback collection is the blame game push. The world will tell us all these things, but one thing that they always try to tell us is who to blame, who to put the blame on. There must be someone responsible for what is going on. There is a culprit, there is a person, there's someone you must blame, there's someone that you must fault, and there's someone that must take the fault. Think about it this way. For the Hebrew believers, all that they're going through, remember, they're being persecuted, they're being excommunicated, their property's being stripped from them, they're being beaten in the streets, things of that nature, because they believe Jesus is the Messiah. Think about who they might blame in all that they're going through. It's 60 to 70 years post-resurrection. They, at this point, might be starting to blame God. God, why is this happening to me? You're to blame for this. I believed in you. You said you were who you said you were, but you're not showing me that you are who you say you are, because I'm still going through all this. Or maybe they would start to blame themselves. Man, I'm so dumb. Why did I believe in this stuff? Why did I believe that he was the Messiah when I'm going through this horrible situation and it's so painful, it's so uncertain, I don't know what the next day holds. Or maybe they're starting to blame the Jews. Man, these people are awful. They beat me up every day, and life's not fun. And in all this uncertainty, in all this pain, they can be tempted to give the fight a face. That's what I want to say to you today. In all your pain, in all your uncertainty, in all that you might be going through, you will be tempted to give the fight a face, to put a name to your problem. So I'm going through this because, and this person's to blame. It's this person's responsibility. It's this, and you can start to blame shift and try to put a face on the fight that you're going through. But Romans 8 tells us that creation was actually subjected to futility and is in groaning pains. That's what it tells us. It says all of creation was subjected to futility, and not willingly. Not willingly. Meaning that every one of us have been subjected to futility, which means sin, and it was not willingly. It was the sin of one man, Adam, that caused all of us to be subjected to the pains. And the rest of creation, the trees, the mountains, the waves, the wind, has all been subjected to futility and to sin, and is in groaning pains and eager in anticipation for what is yet to come. So, I heard it recently said like this: the storm is not the storm is sin. When you're tempted, because the world is telling you someone's at fault, someone's to blame, and you're tempted to blame, and you're tempted to put a face on the fight, put a name on the fight, you need to remember something today. And this has been getting me through lately, because we all are going through trials. We all have something that we're going through. And if you're not there yet, it will just happen because it's life. That's what he's telling these people in Hebrews. When you're tempted to go that way, remember, the storm is not the storm. The storm is sin. What is in front of you is not actually the fight that you're fighting. For instance, there's a lot going on in our world. And you can have your feelings about it. I don't really care. I'm not saying they're wrong. That's not what this is about. But you all see the news. You hear the news. You see what's going on in our world in Afghanistan right now. And you see what's happening with COVID. It's been going on for a very long time now. And you maybe you would be tempted to go, oh, Afghanistan, that's Biden's fault or Trump's fault. Or maybe you'd be tempted to put a face on the fight and you go, oh, COVID, that's China's fault. That's this person's fault. That's this person's fault. Someone's to blame. Someone must take the responsibility. This is the fight I'm going through, and they're to blame. And you could be tempted to put a face on the fight, but you may think that it's this person's fault or it's this person's fault, or maybe you're having trouble in your relationships or in your marriage, and you're tempted to go, it's this person's fault, or maybe it's trouble in your finances and it's this person's fault, or it's this person's fault, or it's this decision's fault, or maybe you're having trouble with your job and it's this person's fault, or and you're so tempted to put a face to the fight. But can I tell you today, the storm is not the storm is sin. And that's why Paul starts with saying, in every relationship, be swift to choose peace over competition. Choose peace over competition. It's like, for instance, it's like you're going down the road and you're driving behind a car, and you are gradually growing more and more frustrated because this car is just not going fast enough for you, or they're not going the speed limit, or they're just taking a joyride that day. Like, do they have nowhere to be? And you're just riding along behind them, and you're just tailing them all the way, and you're growing more and more frustrated. But this is the reality. Have you ever done this before? You're traveling so closely to them that you can't see what's in front of them. Turns out there's actually multiple cars in front of them, and it's not this person's fault, it's not this person's fault, it's not this person's fault. Turns out there's actually a wreck up the road, and it's actually causing a ripple effect, but you're so concerned about what's right in front of you, you're trying to put a face to the fight, and you're tempted to blame shift, and you're tempted to put it on this person. There must be a responsibility. Listen, the storm is not the storm is sin. We've all been subjected to it. The futility, and it was not willingly. Sin is our true fight in this life. And that's why Paul says, look. Oh, by the way, now that you have this understanding that life is going to hit you, life is going to be tough, these things just happen and it's going to be painful. Now that you've got this and you're learning this discipline that the Lord's trying to teach you, hey, just trust in Him. He was always in control. Now that you've got this down, you need to recognize here today, the first thing you got to do is choose peace over competition. Choose not to blame shift. Choose not to put it on somebody. Choose not to always know that there is a reason and an explanation. Choose to say the storm is sin. And then it says, run swiftly towards, it says, in every relationship, be swift to choose. Why does it say be swift to choose peace over competition? Because you've been there before. And I'm going to say it like this. In every conversation, in every situation you're in, this is my advice to you. You got to shut it down. You got to shut it down fast. Because it says be swift. The reason it says be swift is if you let those thoughts creep in, if you let those words out of your mouth, if you're in those conversations where people are saying, it's Biden's fault. That's a mask, stupid mask. It's the vaccine, and you get in that situation, you get in that environment, and quickly you become like a sponge, and you soak that in, and that becomes your mindset in every situation. And quickly you choose competition over peace. Because you start putting a name and a face on the fight, but the real fight is sin. And it's not someone particular's fault, it is sin, and we've all been subjected to it. And why would the people in Hebrews want to choose competition? Well, there's this story, and I've read it before, but we're not going to go there today. But in 1 Kings, there's this incident that happens, and I'm going to paraphrase here, but there is these worshipers of a false god. And then there is Elijah, the one worshiper of the one true God, the God that we worship. And they are all believing in this false God, and he is the only one there believing in our God. And he's like, here, we'll have a little bit of a competition here. You set up the altar, and when it's sacrifice time, you pray that God will send down fire and that it will ignite. You pray to your gods, your false gods, and it will ignite this altar, and your bull will go up in flames, and there will be a sacrifice. And they do it all day, and he's mocking them the whole way because they're crying out. They begin to cut themselves and do all kinds of weird ritual stuff, and it never happens. They're crying out to their false god. And he's like, all right, now watch this. The day goes by. It's the evening time. He says, here's what I want you to do. We're going to dig a trench around my altar, and we're going to fill it up with multiple, I don't even know the number, multiple gallons of water. But here's what we're going to do. After you do it once, I want you to do it 2 more times. So it's going to be 3 times the water. So this thing is soaked. And then we're going to see what happens. So they've put the wood, they've poured all this water on the altar of Elijah's altar. And then he calls out to God, and immediately it engulfs in flames. And it was this competition to say, my God's the real God, and he proves that. But what's happening here is these once Jews, now turned Christians, followers of the way, they would remember this story, and they would be like, oh, I want some competition. I want you to show them, Jesus, that you are the one true God. I want you to show them that this is the real thing. But Paul's telling them, and this is inspired by God, he's saying, it's not about that anymore. There's nothing left to prove. Instead, here's what I want you to do. I want you to, in verse 15, watch over each other and make sure that no one misses the revelation of God's grace. I want you to watch over one another. He's telling them competition's not the way anymore. I'm not trying to prove that I am God. I already proved that with my death, burial, and resurrection. There's nothing left to prove. I am the guy, and that's final. So we're not getting into this war of your bull lights up and mine doesn't. We're not doing that anymore. I know you're frustrated. I know you're going through this pain, but that's not what it's about anymore. And we're not going that route. I want you to watch over one another. And what is he saying here? He is literally saying the people that are persecuting you, the people that are really giving it to you right now, I want you to watch over them. And I want you to make sure no one, including your enemies, misses out on the revelation of God's grace. What is he saying? There is only one importance now. He's saying, oh, by the way, now that you've got this understanding, we got to get back to the main thing. The main thing's the main thing. It's about the revelation of God's grace. And we want people to join the team. And they may have said to each other, I want you to watch over each other and make sure no one misses out on the revelation of God's grace. Well, they're getting beat up by these people. They're like, how do I do that? They're probably thinking, well, you preach to them and you tell them all the wrong that they're doing. And so many of us are tempted to go that route in our lives, but no. He tells them how to make sure that no one misses out on the revelation of God's grace. He says, choose peace over competition. And then he says this back in verse 14. And then he says, run swiftly toward holiness. Have you forgot? He tells them back in the beginning of Hebrews chapter 12, have you forgot? You are incapable of being holy. You are incapable of being holy. And here's the problem. Here's what we start doing, and here's what they will start doing in Hebrews. We have to lose the thems and the theys. And I'm not talking about gender pronouns. I'm literally saying we have to stop categorizing people by they always do this. They never do this. At least I'm not like them. And we start the thems and the theys. And what it's trying to say here is run swiftly. Once you choose peace over competition, once you shut it down in your relationships, that I'm not going to stand for this. I'm not going to sit in this conversation where we put the blame on someone. I'm going to recognize the storm is not the storm. The trial that I'm going through, it's not actually the trial that I'm going through. I'm not going to be mad at this person or this situation or this thing. I'm going to remember that sin is the actual storm. And once I shut it down, I'm not going to go running and saying the thems and the theys, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to run swiftly towards holiness. I've got to run back into the arms of the Father, remembering the revelation of His grace in my life. Because if I don't do that, I'll get sucked in, I'll be like a sponge, and then I will quickly get what it's talking about here, the root of bitterness. And what is it saying here? Run swiftly toward holiness. It's saying that holiness is humility. Holiness is humility. When you quit blame shifting and saying it's this person's fault and putting a face to the fight, and you recognize that sin is the storm, you're not going to run back, or you're not going to be in your circles anymore. You're going to run away from your circles, and you're not going to stand close to those circles, because you know if you stand close to those circles, you'll hear those things that they're saying. You'll be tempted to jump back in and oh yeah, you're right. It is Biden's fault. It is this person's fault. You'll be tempted. No. Don't get close to this. Run swiftly towards holiness. Run swiftly towards humility. Get over here where God revealed Himself to you, where He showed His love to you. If you run to Him, you'll find the humility not to do the theys and the thems and to put the blame on somebody, and you'll choose peace over competition, because listen, you have to run towards holiness because you're incapable of being holy. Remember last week we talked about it. What is discipline? It is an invitation to share in His holiness. You are incapable of holiness. So when it says run swiftly toward holiness, it's not saying quickly run away and start trying and deserving and earning and trying to be the best that you can be. God, it's false humility, by the way. If you're ever in those circles and people are like, well, I just believe it's this person's fault. And you're like, guys, I don't think that we really shouldn't put the blame on people. That's not your place. Just run swiftly towards holiness, because it's false humility for you to sit there and act like you're better than everybody else. If you want to shut it down, run away. Run towards holiness. That's what it's saying here. And then it says, and make sure no one lives with a root of bitterness sprouting within them. Remember, he's saying, oh, by the way, to what he's already said. He's trying, now that he's given them the reassurance that you're going to go through it, life is what it is. Now that he's given them that reassurance that Jesus is the guy, now that they know, he's saying, oh, by the way, we got to keep the main thing the main thing. Make sure no one misses out on God's revelation of grace, because this is for everybody, even the people that are mean to you, even the people that you want to blame. It's for them too. That's what this whole thing's about. Now that you got your reassurance that he is who he says he is, I'm actually saying instead watch over them. Love your enemies. Love those who persecute you. Watch over them. Make sure no one misses out on the revelation of God's grace. And then he's saying, hey, it's kind of the point here. There's going to be new additions to this team. There's going to be new people that choose to follow the way, who choose to follow Jesus, who choose to run swiftly towards holiness. Not their own holiness, because there is none, but to the King's holiness, the only holiness that there is. And hey, there's going to be new additions, and when there is, make sure no one lives with a root of bitterness. What is a root of bitterness? Well, it's the opposite of running towards holiness. It causes division. It is the beginning of entitlement. It is this feeling of being elite. Remember, 60 to 70 years ago, these are the people that said, Jesus is the Messiah. I'm going to believe in him. They were the earliest believers in the church. And he's telling them, look, when there's new additions, because there's going to be new additions now that you have your reassurance, when there are these new additions, don't get bitter and resentful because I'm extending the same grace to them as I did to you. Don't start feeling elite like you're better than them because you chose grace first. Well, they just beat me up in the streets. Why do they deserve to be loved by God? He's saying, lose the thems and the theys. There's no such thing. There is only us. Run swiftly towards holiness. Don't put the blame on somebody. Don't blame shift and try to put a face to the fight. Remember that sin is the problem. And everybody was subjected to it not willingly. So remember, everybody gets in on this offer of grace. I don't know about you, but sometimes I get in my own little headspace. Like there's some people that are excluded from God's grace. Don't you do that sometimes? I mean, if we're honest with ourselves, we start to think that we're elite, that we're better than everybody else. Like there's no way that this person could receive God's grace. And you know that person, whatever that person is for you. They're the image of everything ungodly in your mind. But they're just as subjected to sin as you are, and they are just as offered grace as you are. Listen, when you start to get this entitlement, you start to get this root of bitterness, like you feel like you're being unjustly treated because that they're being treated the same that way that you were treated, even though they excommunicated you, even though they beat you up, even though they did all the... There is no they, there is only us. You chose it first, but that doesn't make you elite. We're all in this together. Jesus is literally beckoning to them, get this discipline in your mind. Life's going to be tough, but let's get back. The main thing is the main thing. Sin is the storm, and sin was defeated on the cross. I feel like I've been giving my storms too much credit lately. My trials too much credit. I've been putting a face on the fights in my life. And I've been so captivated. I've been giving so much of my attention to these things that I've forgotten to keep the main thing the main thing. And then it's about the revelation of God's grace. Because sin was defeated on the cross once and for all. And although my storm is right in my face, there's a pileup because of sin. And people need to be extended the revelation of God's grace. And if I start to feel elite and I just focus on my problem, I'm going to forget why I am here and the purpose that God has given me in my life. to share good news and to make sure that no one misses out on the revelation of God's grace. He says that my 2 commandments to you are to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And then the next is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Make sure no one misses out on the revelation of God's grace. Choose peace over competition. Don't get caught up in this mindset of putting a face to the fight. Because once we start doing these categories, and once all the thing that gets our attention is the fight in our face, we've lost our grasp on what life was truly about. Sin is defeated. Sin is the storm, but sin is defeated. So whatever trial is right in front of your face, it can't have any victory over you. It loses because sin is actually what the fight is, and sin was defeated. So I'm not going to give my trial any more attention. I'm going to focus my eyes towards Jesus. I'm going to love Him with all my heart, soul, and mind. And then I'm going to love my neighbor, making sure that those who persecute me, those who I want to blame, those who I'm upset with, those who I think are responsible for the fight that I'm facing, I want to extend to them the same grace that God extended to me. I want to choose peace over competition. I want to make the main thing, and I want them not to miss out on the revelation of God's grace. That is what He's saying here, because it says, if you let that soak into your mindset that you deserve more than they do, that you're elite, that you deserve blessings and favor over your life, and you don't deserve to be going through the things that you are going through, then it can poison the hearts of many. That's how verse 15 ends. And then he ends it like this in verse 16 and 17. And I want to look at this. We already looked at it in the Passion Translation, but this is where I end. Hebrews 12, 16 and 17 in the Message version. And it says, watch out for the Esau syndrome. Trading away God's lifelong gift in order to satisfy a short-term appetite. You well know Esau later regretted that impulsive act and wanted God's blessing, but by then it was too late. Tears or no tears. This is how he wraps it up. Remember, the whole message is, oh, by the way. Oh, by the way, now that you have this understanding, let's get back to the main thing. The main thing is the main thing, that you love God and you love others. That you recognize your storm is not the storm that you're actually facing. The storm that you're facing has been defeated. It has been conquered. And now that you have that understanding, don't think you're elite. Don't think that you deserve better than everybody else who joins the team later. Just remember it's all about God's grace and it being extended to them. And then this is the final thing. Watch out for the Esau syndrome. And he's saying, oh, and lastly, this goes for new believers and the old believers who've been with us the whole time. When things get tough, remember this whole chapter, this whole series has been about trials and all the things that they have been facing in Hebrews because they're being persecuted. This was all about us and all the things that we're pushed on by the world and our mindsets and us pushing back against that. This is how he wraps it up. Oh, and lastly, if you're a new believer or an old believer, watch out for the Esau syndrome. I don't want the Esau syndrome in my life. So focused on what's right in front of me, so caught up in the storm right in front of me, that I miss what it's all about. If you know the story of Esau, he had been out hunting. And he comes in from a long day. And he's so hungry. And his brother Jacob had been making some soup. And he's made this soup. And he's like, man, I'm so hungry that I'd give you my birthright for that bowl of soup. That's how hungry I am. And it's a ridiculous story because something in me tells me that he wasn't that hungry. Something in me tells me you've got more fight left. Something in me tells me that you're not that hungry for the thing that you think you want right now. Listen to me. The storm is not the storm. The storm is sin. Don't let your mind go there. You're not that hungry because what does it say? Don't trade away God's lifelong gift in order to satisfy a short-term appetite. His grace is enough. His sacrifice was sufficient. You're not as hungry as you think you are. You've got more fight left in you. Don't give up this lifelong gift. A gift that will last you eternity. Your birthright. The thing that you inherited because you are a child of God. Don't give that up because of your short-term appetite. You have that feeling in you that just wants to give in. You just want the pain to stop. Your relationship is difficult. Your marriage feels like it's too much. That illness feels like it's too much. Your job, I don't know if I can take it anymore. That teacher that you're dealing with, that coworker that you're dealing with, you're tempted to give in. You're tempted to give up because the pain and the uncertainty is getting the best of you. But this is how he sums it up. Don't be like Esau. You're not as hungry as you think you are. That appetite is just a short-term appetite. But the gift that God has given you far outweighs that bowl of soup that you're dying for. It's about loving God and loving others. It's not focusing on the thing that's right in front of you. It's recognizing that the storm is sin. We've all been subjected to it. Everyone and anyone has infinite value. God, I just want to see people with infinite value again. I don't want to think that they are excluded and that the thems are excluded. I want to recognize that it's all us and they are included in the us, no matter what their stature is, no matter what color they are, no matter what language they speak, no matter who they are, where they've been or what they've done. They're included on God's grace. And I just want to love people. And I want to stop giving my storm so much attention and start focusing on the revelation of God's grace that sets me free for eternity. I was thinking about this morning. I promise I'm done. It's the last thing I'm going to say. I was thinking about this morning. I was like talking to God. I was like, God, I'm willing to say this, but I don't believe it yet. And maybe you're there today. Maybe you're there with all the uncertainty, with all the pain, with whatever you're going through, whatever life looks like for you. I told God, I said, God, I believe in my heart that one day it's all going to be worth it. I'm willing to say that. But right now, I don't know if I can believe that. And I'm just being honest with you. Like I have this belief inside of me when it's all said and done, when it's all over and we're all in eternity. And then the temporary struggles of this life are final and done and there is no more worries. I have a feeling that day I'll look back and say, it was all worth it. Every pain, every circumstance, every situation, every trial, it was all worth it. But today, it's hard to believe that because all I want is that bowl of soup. I've got the Esau syndrome. I just want out. I just want relief. I just want it to be over. I just want things to ease up. But I'm going to press on, and I'm going to push back, because I know that one day I will say it was worth it.